first off, let's look at what's happening with immigration in the U.S. When we look at the 2016 election, what was the most important issue for people who supported the current president? It was illegal immigration followed by terrorism. For those who voted the opposite way, it was not these things. In fact, it was climate change and gun violence and the gap between rich and poor. So there's a very huge variance in terms of how people see these issues. And when it comes to the last midterm election, 2018, immigration was the second most important issue to people. So it is very much on people's minds. But as I said, there is a huge variance between the political affiliations. One thing that is very interesting, though, is that for the first time since Gallup has been polling Americans about immigration, more Americans actually favor increasing immigration than decreasing immigration for the first time since 1965. So that is a very, very interesting development. First, let's debunk some immigration myths. First off, that we are seeing the biggest share of foreign-born people in the U.S. than ever before. Actually, no. The population is about 13.7% of the total population. That's all foreign-born, authorized, unauthorized, refugees, etc. That's not the highest it's ever been. The number, of course, is high, about 44 million. When it comes to refugees, undocumented immigrants, however, we are seeing a marked decrease in the undocumented population in the U.S. Now, I'm going to go through these slides very, very quickly, but they will be available, they are available currently on our website. Refugee admissions, however, as you know, is at a historic low. We are used to seeing 100,000 or more refugees being admitted into the U.S. every year. That has plummeted and made worse by the current pandemic. And we often hear about Mexican immigrants, Hispanic immigrants, but more Asian immigrants are coming to the U.S. than ever before. And as we saw earlier, the gateway states now are changing. It's no longer necessarily New York and California, but it's states like West Virginia and the Dakotas. So more people are moving into states that have not traditionally seen large immigrant populations. Immigrants move to where the jobs are, where there are opportunities. When it comes to education, we are seeing the most educated immigrants that we've ever seen in U.S. history. More immigrants are coming to the U.S. now with bachelor's degrees than ever before. And it's important to know, especially as teachers, that by the second generation of immigrants, the gap between the parents and children, for instance, in terms of educational attainment, is very, very high. And second-generation immigrants do far, far better across the board than first-generation immigrants. So you are having an impact, even if you're not seeing it in the immediate sense. And as a lot of you know, a lot of children in our schools may not be immigrants, but have immigrant parents. And this is a huge trend that has been expanding, as you see from 1990 to 2018, that share has increased to 25% share of children from immigrant families in our school systems. And because this is an election year, I wanted to show you that the U.S. born generally, while we don't have very high rates of voter turnout, it is overall higher than the foreign-born. However, when you break it up into groups, we see Hispanic and Asian foreign-born voters are more likely to vote. So something to bear in mind. And immigrants and crime, we've heard this over and over again, that immigrants increase crime. This is actually not supported by the data. Immigrants are much less likely to commit crimes, much less likely to be incarcerated, and a lot of this has to do with the fact that immigrants self-select for those who are determined to make something of themselves by moving to another country and starting afresh. A lot of immigrants, if they do commit crimes, are automatically deported, so that's a constant threat. There are many reasons why immigrants actually have a lower propensity of committing crimes. And are immigrants assets to the U.S.? Well, they make up a higher percentage of our labor force, and this is something that we need. They are more likely to be in the labor force, and without immigrants, we will see a drop in our working age population, as a result, fewer workers. And this is because most immigrants come to the U.S. in their prime working age. If you compare foreign-born to the U.S.-born, we see this huge belly in the middle of immigrants who are in their prime working age wanting to come with for the opportunity to work. And as we go through this pandemic, we often hear, and it has been the rationale for a lot of the proclamations, that because we're in this economic stalemate that we need fewer immigrants. And the fact is that immigrants are concentrated in areas that are needed during this pandemic and as we recover. Areas like agriculture, farming, restaurants, food services, and of course, healthcare. And they are on the front lines of coming up with a vaccine. We've shared a lot of these on social media. If you follow us on Facebook and Twitter, you will see that we have these graphics that we share to try to refocus the immigration conversation into something that is more factual. And as I said, when it comes to healthcare, immigrants are almost a third of physicians and surgeons, 28%, 50% of biotechnology workers. This is something that America badly, badly needs. I'm going to move on to entrepreneurship. The fact that immigrants are said to be job takers is not true when we look at the fact that they have a higher propensity to create jobs as small business owners. So they're 13.7% of the population, but 30% of Main Street business owners. And you can see this on any Main Street in the US. And this is not a recent trend. Immigrants have always been highly entrepreneurial. They've always had the propensity to start businesses and create jobs. So some of the most iconic American brands were actually started by immigrants. And now let's get into a little bit of a policy update. As we know, in April, President Trump signed a proclamation that severely limited immigration to the U.S. It was a suspension of many visa issuances. It is expected that he is going to announce later this week another proclamation extending these restrictions. A lot of the restrictions affect the issuance of green cards to people who are currently outside of the U.S., not for people who are currently in the U.S. So this affects green cards for spouses and children of green card holders, parents and siblings. The visa lottery is not happening anymore. But it does exempt, the restrictions do exempt current LPRs or legal permanent residents, spouses and children under 21 of U.S. citizens, investor visas, members of the armed forces. And what we're seeing right now in terms of naturalization, many ceremonies were suspended in the early days of the pandemic, but now, as with other types of court cases, drive-through ceremonies are being held to clear backlogs. However, because of all the immigration restrictions, the main source of funding for USCIS, or the Citizenship and Immigration Services, which is application fees, has not been happening. And so they may actually furlough nearly 3/4 of their workforce. DACA, as you know, the big decision was recently made by the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court ruled that the Trump administration's effort to terminate DACA was not proper. So therefore, DACA continues in its current form. DACA recipients are eligible to renew, and but technically, while the USCIS should begin accepting first-time DACA applications, it is believed that the Trump administration will limit these options. So we advise that people consult attorneys. And it is expected that the administration will file paperwork again to do away with DACA this week. And most recently, as of Monday, international students, those who are on, for instance, F1 visas in colleges and universities from other countries, may be deported if their schools switch to online-only courses and they are not able to transfer to another university. This affects thousands of students across the U.S. That's over 1 million students at nearly 9,000 schools. And they bring in a lot of income that is really going to hurt not just universities themselves, but also local economies. And finally, public charge and COVID care. We want to emphasize that USCIS will not consider testing, treatment, or even preventative care related to COVID-19 in determining whether someone is likely to become a public charge or someone dependent on the government for support. So please get tested for COVID-19 if you think you may have it. Seek treatment. It is to your benefit tremendously. So I want to end by letting you know that, again, you can request free fact sheets from our Institute for Immigration Research at George Mason University. This presentation is available on our website right now. And I hope that you have a little bit of a sense of the state of immigration in the U.S. as it is with the data and with the policy right now.